So right after I released our look at the newest cinematic about Yone and Yasuo, Riot actually released Yone's bio. And with it, we finally learned what's happening with him, what's the deal with the white-haired guy who's not Yone in the Path animated trailer, and why were we able to get Yone as a champion in the first place. So without further ado, let's have a look at his bio. Yone was a man who always strictly followed the codes of honor and duty. Even as a child, he loved his family dearly, which is why it was hard for him when he lost his father. Naturally, this is what motivated him to assume the role of the family's protector, to make sure the other members of their family wouldn't have to suffer. But just like Yone was patient and disciplined, his half-brother Yasuo was brash and reckless. Yasuo is only Yone's half-brother because he was born after his mother was already a widow. One year during autumn, a mysterious man who became Yasuo's father arrived in their village. But just like that lonely season, he was quickly gone again even before winter arrived to Ionia. So, to this day, we still don't know who is Yasuo's father. We just know that that man is still probably somewhere in the world. Anyway, although the two half-brothers were in contrast to each other, with Yone being patient and Yasuo reckless, the two were inseparable. And when Yone began his studies at the sword school near their village to become a swordsman, young Yasuo followed him. At first, only Yone was let in, but Yasuo waited outside the school, in the rain, long enough to show everyone his determination, which made the teachers open the gates for him too. As they trained, Yone was often forced to hold Yasuo's impulsiveness back. Yasuo was naturally gifted to become a swordsman. In fact, he was so good at it, it not only annoyed the other students, but it also drew the attention of Elder Suma, the last master of the legendary wind technique. The old man saw Yasuo's potential. However, being reckless once again, Yasuo refused to become the elder's pupil. And so, standing up as the protector and making sure his brother stays on the right path, Yone pleaded with Yasuo to set aside his arrogance, and he gifted him a maple seed, which was not only a sign of his support, but at their school, it was the highest lesson in humility. And it is this tradition of passing on maple seeds that probably leads to the old legend about the two swordsman brothers and their sapling swords that grew from these seeds. This part where Yone gave Yasuo a seed was explained more in the short story called A Sword Without a Sheath. So here's a direct quote from it from Yone's point of view. "When I watched my young brother begin training, he breathed life into the blade at first touch. One heard whispers in the halls comparing him to the sword masters of old. But as Yasuo grew and his skills increased, so did his ego. He was impetuous and boastful. He ignored our master's lessons and knew nothing of patience. Fearing my brother had stayed too far from the way, I went not to warn him, but to make an appeal to his honor. I gave him a maple seed, our school's highest lesson in humility. A seed is just a seed, but given time, one may come to know the beauty it holds within. Yasuo took my gift, and the following day, he pledged himself to Elder Suma." So that is how Yasuo became Suma's apprentice and his personal guard. Yone was proud of his brother, but he had doubts about Suma's judgment, fearing that Yasuo's impulsive nature would make him a poor student. But Elder Suma was well respected and did not make careless decisions. So instead of worrying about it, Yone decided to focus on practicing with dual blades. Soon, Yone himself became powerful and respected swordsman, and though his skill was unmatched, when he sparred against Yasuo, who was learning how to wield the wind technique, their fights were a sight to behold that brought joy to the two brothers themselves. But this joy quickly faded when war came to Ionia. Yone, together with many other disciples, left to defend against the approaching Noxian forces, while Yasuo, who also wanted to go out and fight, was ordered to stay behind to protect his master. But one fateful night, Elder Suma was discovered dead, slain by the wind technique which he taught others. Of course, we know that Elder Suma died after Riven walked into his temple, and she asked him if he could cleanse her sword of the Noxian runic magic. But when Elder Suma tried to help her using the wind, the blade shattered and one of its shards killed him. And the reason why Yasuo wasn't there to help was because Yasuo disobeyed his orders, and he left the Elder to help fight the invading Noxians. But of course, nobody in the school knew about what happened to the Elder, or why was Yasuo gone. And since there was evidence in the wind technique being involved in this, that's the reason why everyone was suspicious of Yasuo. Anyway, when Yone returned from the battle, he found that Yasuo had fled. This shook Yone to his core, because his fears were proven true. Elder Suma had been wrong, and so Yone started blaming himself. If Yasuo had murdered Suma, Yone had failed to teach him the righteous path. If Yasuo had simply abandoned his post and allowed his master to die, then Yone had failed to instill him with discipline. Either way, Yasuo had already killed several of those who pursued him, even if it was in self-defense, and to Yone, their blood stained his own hands as much as his brothers. The story doesn't mention this, but it was about this time when one of the Azakana attached to Yone. If you are not sure what I'm talking about, the Azakana are the minor versions of demons. They are little spiritual parasites that feed on negative emotions. And after they consume enough emotions, that's when they grow up into proper demons. These days they are polluting the entire Ionia, because after the Noxian invasion, the land had been consumed by war and negativity. And since during this war the dead are not being properly buried, and the Azakana can easily reach them, the entire continent became a place for the Azakana to grow. So just know that after Elder Suma died, one of the Azakana attached to Yone, feeding on his self-doubt. After this, Yone tracked Yasuo down himself. When their swords finally crossed, Yone's steel was unmatched, but Yasuo's mastery of the wind cut his brother down.
I'm no murderer. Then why are you running?
Death, however, was not the end. When Yone awoke within the spirit realm, the weight of his failure crushed him. His fury flared and he pounded his fists on the ground in rage. Here, I have to point out that although the story here is pretty much retelling what we have seen in the Path animated trailer, the man we see there is not Yone. Okay? We explained this in the video we made on that cinematic. So once again, this is not Yone. This is the elder brother from the legends of the two brothers. This was confirmed numerous times by the writers themselves. I know this may be confusing, but that cinematic is showing us what someone would picture in their head if someone was telling them the story. A good example of how this cinematic works is Robin Hood. Sure, maybe Robin Hood didn't split his own arrows, and maybe he didn't shoot apples off of people's heads, but apparently Robin Hood was still a real man. So the legend is only a story that leads to the truth. Here, because the elder brother from the legend suffered a very similar fate to Yone, Riot used the cinematic to not only tie the animation to Yone, but they also gave the old legend deeper meaning. So, should you want to, you could technically imagine this guy as Yone and the cinematic would be canon. But in case someone thinks that this is Yone, feel free to correct them, so you can look like the smart person. Anyway, back to the story. Just pay attention to the fact that there will be minor differences in the cinematic. When Yone awoke within the spirit realm, the weight of his failure crushed him. His fury flared and he pounded his fists on the ground in rage. A rumbling laugh pierced his thoughts. He turned and beheld a monstrous humanoid spirit with blood-red blade. It was a powerful Azakana, a predatory entity that had long stalked Yone from beyond the veil. Before Yone could speak, it struck. He drew the spiritual echoes of his blades to his side, just in time to block the attack. He once again found himself in a duel, where his swordsmanship was unparalleled, but he was overwhelmed by magic. Anger consumed him. A life of honor and duty snapped. In one furious moment, Yone wrestled the Azakana's blade from it and ran the creature through. The last thing he heard before new darkness took him was the same rumbling laughter. The next time he opened his eyes, Yone found himself back in the material realm, though it was a grim shadow of what it had been. Once again, the story doesn't mention this, but from the interactions with the spirits in the client, we know that time moves slower inside the spirit realm. So the reason why Yone sees Ionia differently now was because years passed outside while he was fighting with the Azakana. Anyway, he struggled to his feet, the spirit realm hazy in his mind, and blood-red sword in his hand. His face was now covered by a mask which he could not remove, because the mask was the new form of the Azakana he had just defeated. But although this Azakana in the form of a mask has no influence over Yone's body, it still gave him some of its powers. And so, with this mask, Yone has the ability to see other Azakana. This gave him the chance to not only fight these minor demons, but to also learn about them. And in fact, Yone found out that once he learned the Azakana's true name, he could seal them in masks that represented specific emotions. However, he's not sure if these masks hold the Azakana permanently. And when it comes to his own mask, Yone can't tell if or when the Azakana he wears would reawaken to consume him. In life, Yone had worn the mask of protector, brother, and disciple for so long that it had become his identity. But now, in moments of stillness, he swears he can feel the mask shifting upon his face, with his own past and unresolved conflict with Yasuo becoming child's play in comparison to this new threat. So Yone now hunts these Azakana in an attempt to understand what he has become, with each name bringing him a step closer to learning about the thing whose laughter still haunts him. Nothing else matters. There is only the chase of the truth. And perhaps, once he learns the true name of his own Azakana, he could become free of it too. And that was the story of Yone. Riot very specifically avoided explaining why or how Yone was able to come back. That's because this mystery is the point of his entire lore. Yone is now on a quest to learn about the Azakana, how they work, and how to get rid of them, especially the one that's permanently attached to his face. But I just quickly want to mention that since the Azakana are just the smallest demons we can find at the bottom of the demonic compendium, this means that as Yone learns more about them, perhaps he will cross some of the other demons we know. And who knows, this could lead to meeting the ruler without the crown.